We are backing up those investments with concrete, visible support, including the rotational deployment of 4 fast response cutters to actively partner with the Philippine Coast Guard in patrolling and securing your exclusive economic zone.
The crew of the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Tampa, 67-day deployment in support of Operation Pacific.
They're abandoning position for degrees 22.18 north.
4 U.S. Coast Guard fast response cutters are being rotationally deployed to the Philippines to patrol its exclusive economic zone alongside the Philippine Coast Guard.
U.S. high-speed patrol vessels join the Philippine Coast Guard in securing the Philippines' exclusive economic zone.
And these 4 ships are part of something bigger. The U.S. has reassigned 6 Sentinel-class cutters to the Western Pacific, with vessels operating from Singapore and rotating through Subic Bay. Why does that matter? Because in the South China Sea, the front line is increasingly shaped by Coast Guard ships, water cannons, dangerous maneuvers, and maritime blockades, not just warships.
This is China Coast Guard,
And the Philippines has already faced confrontations with China near Scarborough Shoal and Second Thomas Shoal. So Washington is putting more Coast Guard capability into exactly this environment. But there is a second message. The U.S. says it is not leaving the Indo-Pacific, while expecting the Philippines to take greater responsibility for its own security.
The Philippine Coast Guard will be coming over here to do some small boat training with us.
So these 4 cutters are more than a patrol deployment. They are an early test of a new alliance model, more U.S. capability, more Philippine responsibility. And the question is simple. Can that model actually make the South China Sea harder to dominate? The announcement came from U.S. Undersecretary of War for Policy Elbridge Colby during a Strat-based forum in Manila. But the important part was not just the 4 cutters. Colby presented them as part of a broader effort to modernize the U.S. Philippines alliance through EDCA sites, resilient infrastructure, advanced training, and greater interoperability.
Here in the Philippines, our alliance is undergoing a historic modernization rooted in profound mutual respect. This is not a one-sided partnership. The Philippines is stepping up, taking the lead to defend itself, and investing more to modernize its military and Coast Guard.
The concrete step is this. 4 U.S. Coast Guard fast response cutters will rotate through the Philippines and work with the Philippine Coast Guard to patrol the country's EEZ. These are 46 9-meter Sentinel-class cutters designed for fast maritime security missions including fisheries enforcement, law enforcement, search and rescue, and vessel inspections. But the Philippine deployment is only part of the story. The United States has reassigned 6 fast response cutters to the Western Pacific as an expeditionary cutter squadron, operating from Singapore and the Philippines, with vessels rotating through Subic Bay.
Just gonna take a hot minute.
The 6 cutters are Robert Goldman, Glenn Harris, Charles Moulthrope, John Scheuerman, Clarence Sutphin Jr., Emlyn Tunnel. Their arrival also marks the first time these cutters have operated from Subic Bay, giving the U.S. Coast Guard a more persistent presence in the wider Indo-Pacific. And this is already an operational deployment.
Magsisilbing katuwang ng Philippine Coast Guard ang fast response cutters ng Estados Unidos para magpatrolya sa West Philippine Sea.
In June, Emlyn Tunnel conducted a live fire exercise in the South China Sea before joining Philippine Coast Guard and Navy vessels for maritime drills. Other cutters also operated with Canadian and Thai forces during regional exercises. So this is not simply 4 American ships visiting the Philippines. It is part of a broader shift toward persistent Coast Guard presence, maritime cooperation, and partner operations across the Western Pacific. And that raises the bigger question. Why is Washington putting this much emphasis on Coast Guard cooperation in the Philippines right now? Because the pressure Manila faces isn't always coming from warships. It is happening in the gray zone of the South China Sea. There was another important phrase in Colby's Manila speech. He called the Philippines a model ally. That wasn't just diplomatic praise. It reflects what Washington increasingly wants from its partners. More capability, more investment, more responsibility. Colby put it bluntly, we seek partnerships, not dependencies.
Our priority is to field a fully operational, resilient architecture of denial defense stretching along the first island chain. Yet this defense architecture cannot rest on American shoulders alone.
And Manila is moving in that direction, modernizing its military and Coast Guard while expanding cooperation with Washington on infrastructure, training, and interoperability. So calling the Philippines a model ally is also a signal to other partners. When allies invest more in their own defense, Washington is prepared to invest alongside them. There is another reason Manila matters.
Kindly invite everyone to perform the ASEAN handshake.
The Philippines is ASEAN chair this year, giving Washington a partner with influence beyond its own waters. Colby praised Manila's pragmatic regional leadership, important recognition as ASEAN navigates growing U.S.-China competition. And the timing is significant. The two countries are marking 75 years of the Mutual Defense Treaty while simultaneously expanding exercises, military cooperation, and maritime security activities. So after 75 years, the alliance is being framed around a different principle, not permanent dependence. Shared capability. And that leads to a bigger question. If this is the model Washington wants, is America actually putting more capability behind it? Colby's answer was clear. The United States is not leaving Asia. That directly challenges the growing narrative of American retrenchment in the Indo-Pacific. Instead, he described Washington's approach as disciplined and necessary strategic prioritization. In other words, the U.S. says it is not abandoning the region. It is pursuing a more focused presence built around forward capability, stronger allies, and deterrence by denial along the first island chain. Colby also made clear that Washington intends to remain part of the region's security architecture.
America is definitely not disengaging from Asia. To the contrary, our vital national interests dictate our enduring presence here. What the commentariat frequently misinterprets as disengagement or retrenchment is, in reality, a disciplined and necessary strategic prioritization.
But here's the real test. Is this just rhetoric, or is Washington putting resources behind it? The cutter deployment provides one tangible answer. 4 cutters will work directly with the Philippine Coast Guard inside the Philippines as part of a wider U.S. Coast Guard presence operating from Singapore and the Philippines. That's not a massive military buildup, but it is real hardware, forward presence, and partner integration. And if that pattern continues through infrastructure, training, and deployments, then Colby's message becomes more than political rhetoric. It becomes a different way of maintaining American power in the Indo-Pacific. And that brings us to the strategy behind it: deterrence by denial. Behind the cutter deployment is a broader U.S. strategy maintaining a favorable balance of power in the Indo-Pacific, with the first island chain as a key geographic anchor. Colby was reinforcing the doctrine Hegseth outlined at the 2026 Shangri-La Dialogue, Deterrence by Denial. Put simply, the goal is not just to threaten retaliation after an attack. It is to build enough military capability, resilient infrastructure, and allied coordination to make aggression unlikely to succeed in the first place. Hegseth described the objective as making aggression infeasible, escalation unattractive, and war deemed irrational. And this is where the Philippines becomes important. Washington cannot build that denial defense alone. Colby is asking allies to invest more in their own forces, while the United States provides additional capabilities and support. His goal is a network of highly capable sovereign nations. The Philippines is therefore not just another location for U.S. forces. It is supposed to become one of the partners making the first island chain harder to challenge. And the 4 cutters fit into that logic. U.S. capability, Philippine capacity. Allied interoperability. They cannot transform the military balance by themselves, but they can make the regional security network harder to pressure and harder to overwhelm. And that leads to the next question. If deterrence is about preventing one power from succeeding, what kind of regional order is Washington actually trying to preserve? Colby's answer is clear. No single power should dominate the Indo-Pacific. He presented this as part of a long-standing American approach to Asia, maintaining a regional balance where no country can dictate the choices of others. The history behind that claim is more complicated. U.S. policy toward Asia has changed significantly over time. But the strategic principle Colby is emphasizing is straightforward. Washington wants to prevent any single power from dominating the region. And while Colby did not describe this as a policy of containing China, the implication is difficult to miss. A stronger Chinese military presence and the possibility of Chinese regional dominance is precisely the scenario this balance of power strategy is designed to prevent. But there is an important difference in tone. At the 2026 Shangri-La Dialogue, Hegseth spoke more directly about China's military buildup and deterrence by denial along the First Island chain.
We will stand with you and work alongside you to deter Chinese aggression. Each day, together, no one should doubt America's commitment to our Indo-Pacific allies and partners.
Colby's message in Manila was softer: partnership, sovereignty, shared responsibility, regional balance. That language matters in Southeast Asia. Washington is pursuing the same broad objective, preventing regional hegemony, but presenting it less as confrontation with China and more as a network of capable sovereign partners. And that is where the Philippines fits. A stronger Philippines doesn't need to dominate the region. It simply makes it harder for any one power to dominate it. For the Philippines, this is where the deployment becomes practical. In July, Philippine vessels faced water cannon incidents near Scarborough Shoal, while a Filipino service member was injured during a confrontation with the China Coast Guard at 2nd Thomas Shoal. That is the maritime environment these cutters are entering. 4 rotational U.S. Coast Guard cutters give Manila additional patrol capacity and greater interoperability with an American maritime force. But there is an important limit. A Sentinel-class fast response cutter is about 154 feet long. It is a capable patrol vessel, but it is not a sea control platform. 4 cutters cannot change the naval balance in the South China Sea. What they can change is the day-to-day maritime presence. More patrols, more coordination, more ability to operate alongside Philippine forces. And that matters in a gray zone environment, where pressure is often applied through blocking, shadowing, dangerous maneuvers and water cannons, rather than open warfare. There is also a sovereignty advantage for Manila. These are rotational Coast Guard deployments working alongside the Philippine Coast Guard, not American forces taking over Philippine maritime security. So the real value isn't that 4 cutters can defeat a larger navy. It is that they can help the Philippines stay present, respond faster, and make coercion harder to carry out. And that is exactly the kind of capability Washington's model ally strategy is trying to build. But Washington isn't testing that model only in the Philippines. The Philippines is only the first stop. Colby and Assistant Secretary of War John No are also visiting Indonesia, Thailand, and Cambodia to strengthen bilateral defense relationships. And each stop sends a different signal. Indonesia matters because of its size, strategic geography, and position across Southeast Asia's key maritime routes. Thailand is a long-standing U.S. security partner with decades of military cooperation, exercises, and established interoperability. But Cambodia is the more interesting case. Phnom Penh has deep strategic ties with Beijing, yet Washington is still engaging its defense establishment. Cambodia is also preparing to resume the Angkor Sentinel exercise with the United States in 2027. That suggests Washington is not simply asking Southeast Asian countries to choose America over China. Instead, it is trying to keep defense relationships open, expand practical cooperation, and prevent the region's security architecture from becoming dominated by any single power. And that makes this 4-country tour significant. The Philippines may be the model, but Washington is testing whether the same partnership strategy can work across Southeast Asia. So, what does this deployment actually tell us? Start with the hardware. 4 U.S. Coast Guard cutters are coming to work with the Philippine Coast Guard inside the Philippine EEZ. But those 4 cutters are only the visible part of a much larger strategy. A stronger Philippines. Greater U.S. support. Shared responsibility. Stronger regional coordination. And behind that is Washington's broader objective, a favorable balance of power where no single country can dominate the Indo-Pacific.
We are not leaving. In fact, we are digging in to ensure a favorable balance of power where it matters most. Our driving and abiding purpose is to maintain a favorable balance of power in the Indo-Pacific. A Pacific dominated by any hegemon would unravel the regional balance of power and undermine the equilibrium we all seek to preserve, end quote. This long-standing view of the United States in Asia free of hegemony has been at the core of our regional approach since the earliest days of our republic.
So, does the rhetoric match the hardware? Partly. The deployments are real. The infrastructure investment, training, and expanded cooperation are real. But 4 patrol cutters cannot transform the military balance in the South China Sea. What they can demonstrate is a different model of alliance. The United States provides additional capability while its partners take greater responsibility for regional security. And that is where the real test begins. This model may work during routine patrols and military exercises. But what happens when a genuine crisis arrives? If Philippine forces face serious pressure, can this partnership produce a faster, stronger, and more coordinated response? Because that is when Washington's model ally concept will truly be tested. Not in a speech, not in an exercise, but in a crisis.